So, Stephen, before we started recording, I was looking at your letterbox, and the last
Yes.
4 movies that you watched were
Yes.
Rope
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
the
For the
first
podcast.
3 Pokemon movies.
Yes, the first 3. Yeah. I'm not going to go any further. I'd watched 1 and 2 before. I never watched 3 until today. I've now seen 3. 3's pretty good.
3 was good.
Yeah, I
Were
like 3.
you what inspired this?
My child really likes Pokemon at the moment. I think it's because
Okay.
he didn't naturally discover Pokemon. Obviously, he's just been subjected
Mhm.
to it's in that Venn diagram of thing that parent will enjoy and thing that child will enjoy anything at the moment because it's flashy.
Mhm.
He was it's TVs are a nightmare nowadays because they're all connected to
Mhm.
the internet. And we've got a Samsung TV, and it's not connected to television, but it's got about 100 fake TV channels on it to give the illusion of being television. And when you
Yeah.
turn it on, it just defaults to one of them. And I didn't realize it was doing that. And every time I turned it on, it turned itself to a movie channel. But because it's not a real TV channel, it just plays anything at any time of the day. So I kept turning on
Mhm.
the TV, and just at one point, Starship Troopers was playing at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And I was like, this needs to stop. So now, every time I turn on the TV, it just shows Transformers. There's a channel that shows
Okay.
Transformers all day. And my child was so overwhelmed by the idea that there could be robots that were also vehicles, and it blew his mind.
Yeah, I mean
So,
it's pretty mind-blowing
yeah,
to me. Your child's what, 2, and it's mind-blowing to
almost.
him.
Yeah.
I'm over 30 and it's
Mm,
mind-blowing to me.
yeah.
We're,
He
is
saw
it
a
the
vehicle, loves vehicles so much, and then that vehicle became a robot, and he was just like, what? It just changed his world. So that and Pokemon is his jam right now.
Okay, so were you a Pokemon person back in the day? Was
What do
that
you mean? What do you
ever
mean back in the day? I watched 3 Pokemon movies this weekend. What do you mean back in the day? Currently,
Well, I don't know if you were doing that with the child, or if that was you were feeling a little nostalgic, or what. So I guess what I'm hearing is that you have been and always will be a
I
big
love
Pokemon person.
Pokemon rules. I love Pokemon. I like
Are you
Magikarp.
I'm sure you know that Pokemon cards and like the resale market is
Mm.
like totally blowing up right
Yeah.
now.
It's massive. It's broken. It's dangerous. I got really into that app last year, the Pokemon trading card iOS app.
Yeah.
I played that for a month and then regretted all of my life and deleted it off my phone to make sure I didn't play it ever again.
At least you were like actually playing like the trading card game. You were like playing I don't even know. I don't know how to describe it, but it seems like there are folks out there who are just buying cards for the sake of like collecting cards, which I guess people have been collecting like sports memorabilia for years, so it's not all that different, but still seems interesting that people are willingly spending hundreds of dollars on a given Pokemon card to then just like have in their home.
Yeah. No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the cards at all. I'm interested in the
Yeah.
video games and the anime. That's where I draw the line.
Okay. What's your favorite Pokemon?
Oh, Magikarp.
Because
Because he rules.
it's
He's a
useless.
splashy fish that is nothing. Then Psyduck probably. Psyduck also rules.
I love Psyduck. Psyduck is like a funny useless, as opposed to Magikarp is just
Magikarp's
fully useless. I saw someone point out that this is like so totally off base from what it is that we're gonna be talking about, but someone was pointing out that the name of the data center being built in Eddington is
yes. Oh, I know it straight away. Yeah.
Magikarp, which is like something that is like useless that then turns into the like greatest monster in the universe.
Yeah. Best part about
So obviously Ari Aster was not being subtle with that choice. Yeah, I know that you didn't love Eddington.
I did not.
But we're not here to talk about
It's not
Eddington.
the editing podcast. That's for later.
That's for later. We're here once Eddington is inevitably inducted into the canon, because it obviously will be. It's going to be the movie of 2025. But we're here today to talk about
Pavements.
a great movie.
Everyone else is saying Pavements, not just me. Everyone else is saying Pavements.
I've heard no one saying that.
You've heard me. Pavements.
I've just heard just you.
Pavements. Oh, Pavements is so good. Everyone watch Pavements. Watch Pavements.
Check out Pavements. I have not seen Pavements, but I need to watch it. A lot of movies from 2025 that I need to watch. But we're not here to talk any 2025 movies. No. We are here to talk a 1948 movie, an Alfred Hitchcock film. Rope. We're talking Rope. It's another episode of the canon. we're back. You should know that. You're here. You're listening to us.
Mm.
We've got Steven back on, one of our favorite returning guests.
Just two guys
How
chatting.
have you been? Two
Yeah.
guys chatting rope. We haven't seen you since last season when you came on to talk Brazil with me. So very happy to have you back.
Very
And
happy to be
hopefully
back.
I won't knock my microphone away anymore.
Maybe you will, maybe you won't, and that's going to be the thrilling part. That's the suspense, the master of suspense. As we listen to this, is it blocked out perfectly? Will the microphone get hit
Yeah.
on?
We're gonna see if we can try to do this entire episode in one single take. There might be a few sneaky edits here
No,
and
I
there,
was going
but
to
we're
do
gonna
it in
try to do
10-minute
one.
takes. I was going to do it in several 10-minute takes and stitch them
Yeah.
together as I zoom into the back of you every 10 minutes. The camera just
Yeah.
zooms suspiciously into a man's
Every
back.
10 minutes I'm gonna randomly turn in my chair, and people are gonna wonder why is that happening. But it's really so that we can stitch together two separate 10-minute takes that we're doing. So I am very excited to talk about this. I hadn't seen this movie. I am a little
Oh, really?
embarrassed to admit that my Hitchcock knowledge or my Hitchcock exposure has been very, very, very limited to that like 4 film run of The Birds, Vertigo, Psycho,
Yeah.
Rear Window. Is Rear Window
North by
in that
Northwest
run?
in that run.
Yeah, North by Northwest, which I also haven't seen. So this is only my 5th Hitchcock movie. I'm kind of a Hitchcock noob, so I assume that you have much more Hitchcock knowledge because I feel like you've seen every movie ever.
I've seen every average Hitchcock movie. As of a couple of weeks ago, I had 2 left, so this gave me an excuse to watch the final 2. Maybe it was 3 I had not seen, which are 3 towards the end. Not Frenzy. I'd already seen Frenzy, but it was his last batch, which are not great but semi-interesting. But yeah, I absolutely love Alfred Hitchcock. A troubled and troubling man in many ways. Not a great person. I mean, we're not doing top trumps of terrible auteurs, but he's not the worst of them. Not that that matters. But a superlative filmmaker. And as much as we rail against auteur theory, this is someone who, for good or for ill, has complete control of his sets, and it comes out in the art itself. These are very designed, intentioned films. And Rope may be the first Hitchcock film that I saw.
Oh wow!
I think so.
How many films are we talking?
My favorite. I don't know.
What's his total filmography?
I think 52.
Is it 52? Okay, so I have a little bit of work to do to catch up.
It's more than
I've got
52.
5 down.
I've seen more than 52 because there is a German version of one of them, and there are some shorts and propaganda stuff that I've seen as well. There's a couple of his more oddities that I can't find, and he contributes to one larger piece at some point. I don't know if that counts in the 52. That's absolutely dreadful anyway. But yeah, he's got the 52 main films that are counted as the
52 main features that we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Rope goes from silent up into the
Yeah.
sound era, and from forced black and white to Technicolor back to black and white to color, etc. So yeah, he just runs the gamut.
He really did it all. It's insane. And this was his first film in color, and we'll talk about sort of like what that means
Which is pretty interesting, because in my mind I was surprised to the extent that when I watched Rope today, I had to double check I wasn't watching a colorized version, because in my mind, even though I know it's his first color film, Rope is a black and white film, because I think because of the black and white themes of it, because it deals in dichotomies. If you made Rope today, you would make it black and white. And it's interesting that his first Technicolor film is not a film that uses color, when we're so used to Technicolor films making a feature of color.
It seems like the use of color, or like the desire to use color, was like super limited to just wanting the sunset.
Yes.
At some point, to just feature the colors of the sunset, which obviously, it does make sense narratively for like where we are in the film when that does come about. But in terms of like how color is used in the rest of the movie, it's not something where it seems like, oh, this is the movie that has to be my first one in color, because I have so many ideas.
This is not, we've burst into the one of Technicolor. Yeah. There's something interesting, isn't there, of I am able to use color, and now I'm going to use color to portray colorlessness, to portray something that is washed out and drab, which you would not see if it was black and white. This would look more stylish and classy. And though it is a well-to-do, stylish, classy, on the surface party, it is also kind of drab. And the color, by it being very drained, brings that out in a way that black and white cinematography would not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. So I guess before we get into the movie a little bit more, because you do have this this knowledge and this context of Hitchcock as like a full and complete filmmaker, do you want to give us like a little bit more context in terms of where this movie specifically sort of fits in like the career trajectory of his movies and like of his filmmaking? Like, does this sit in like a particular place within how it is that we understand him as a filmmaker, or is it just something that is like one of the better or more famous examples of his genius as a filmmaker?
I think it is a very classic Hitchcock film of doing the Hitchcock things that he is known for very, very well. Um, so it's not the wrong man Hitchcock film, which the wrong
Hmm.
man trope is maybe his key trope that goes back to, like the man on the run that's wanted. This is the right man. But even the wrong man trope is about confusion over crime and this idea of the criminal case being pursued. So he's obsessed with this idea of a crime hanging over a narrative, which is what this is all about.
Hmm.
He's also at his best when it's both thrilling and quite funny.
Hmm.
He's not, though there are some of his broad comedies that I like. I would say his broad comedies are one of his weakest moments, and his purely overly dramatic films can be turgid in that way. Obviously, there are exceptions to all of that, but that sparkling wit, it being playful but also quite cerebral, is spot on. Um, I think this is also key Hitchcock because of how it toys around with censorship.
Hmm.
I was interested in watching his last few films because his last few films is post Hays Code, and he can kind of do what he didn't do before, and they're actually less interesting for that reason. So you've got Hitchcock films where sex is talked about openly and there's active violence in them, but he's so masterful at illusion and he gets around it in
Hmm.
dialogue. We'll talk a lot
Hmm.
about the queerness of Rope because the queerness of Rope is very spoken about.
Hmm.
Rope is a more interesting text, the same as Notorious is, which is a bit before Rope, because of the way it has to dodge around and duck and dive censorship, which he had this gleeful battle with for most of his career.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Rope is just before a run of Stone Cold classics, but it is in that thing. So Notorious, I think, is a bit more acclaimed maybe than Rope. So that's just a bit before. But then after it, you've got Strangers on a Train, Rear Window, um, Vertigo, Psycho, North by Northwest, etc., etc. So then you've got the what are seen as the masterpieces. But Rope may
Yeah.
be his first proper masterpiece.
Yeah. That's such an interesting point. And I always come back to that with like De Palma trying to mimic Hitchcock, and he's like, I'm gonna show and do all of the things in my movies that Hitchcock couldn't show and do. And obviously De Palma's like great and he has a ton of masterpieces of his own, but a lot of what makes these like amazing Hitchcock movies so amazing is that battle between him and like what it is that he wants his movies to be about and the censorship of the code at the time, and like uh working within the studio system and all of those things that kind of limited him, so he had to like be more creative. And also I think that sort of like creative battle is what always, not always, but like oftentimes gives us some of like the most amazing cinematic experiences.
Mm.
So I think we'll talk about that too with like the gimmick of this movie and why the gimmick here is way more impressive than when like that same gimmick is used in maybe something that's a bit more contemporary, because it doesn't feel like there's as much like creative juice going into how it is that we're carrying it out, because we just like we do have this like great technology available to us that sort of easily fixes problems that otherwise needed like some pretty interesting problem solving approaches taken to in order to like make it appear the way that it does ultimately appear to us. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about is Hitchcock and auteur theory. And actually, no, let's not talk about that because I feel like we talk about it enough, and everyone sort of knows that like when we're talking auteur theory, it is more so Hitchcock, and because his movies have such a particular stamp, even though it was within the studio system, as
Mm.
opposed to like thinking of auteur theory um with like the movie brats of like the 70s.
Yeah.
That's Hitchcock is what the oh my god, what the all those French fuckers were
New
talking
Wave.
about. new wave folks, but what was the magazine that they wrote for?
Okay, the cinema.
Yeah. So
They
we don't have
loved
to
it.
get they loved him. We don't have to get too much deeper into that unless you have any additional thoughts about.
Well, it's interesting because you've got your French Hitchcock, you've got your Italian Hitchcock, and there's that sense of the filmmakers at the time who are always like linked
Mhm.
to. So you've got Argento on the Italian side of wanting to be the Italian Hitchcock, and again goes into the smuttier, dirtier, grungier side. And then
Yeah.
Clouseau, I guess, would be the French Hitchcock, which is a bit more on the, let's say, classier side. But yeah, Hitchcock obviously a singular and therefore much imitated filmmaker.
Yeah. So how long had he been working stateside when he made Rope?
Well, so this is where I get things. This is where I forget and get confused in my chronology.
Mhm.
So Rebecca is Breakaway, isn't it? So then we are making our American movies. So this is a little bit after that, but that's only because he makes so many movies in this period. So this is
Mhm.
still arguably towards the beginning of that American period, and this is still a British feeling film. If I am to nationalize films, though this is
Interesting.
arguably this is they're in that very American upper class sect,
Mhm.
but it's also they are an inch away from cut glass British accents at any second. This could be debonair British party. It's very much him capturing a class of people that, dare I say, is inherited from British social systems and then transplanted into the US.
Yeah. That's I mean when we're thinking about the people who make up this particular world, it's both in the movie and in real life, like you're saying. It's very much so inherited from like
The colonialist
British
institution of the university, which then is obviously copied of whole cloth into America to ape the
yeah.
British education system for colonialist reasons, and this is what that film is about: of the ideas on college campuses. You know, a film about ideas on college campuses.
What a wild concept.
Mm.
Imagine. So, okay. There are a lot of ideas and themes in this movie that we're going to have to
Mm.
get to. But I think the main selling point or like the main draw of this movie, right, for someone, if we're thinking about why is this movie essential, why is this something that a budding film fan needs to watch when they are, first getting into cinema and trying to fully understand the history and story of movies. I think the main draw is that one take, the continuous take gimmick. So I
Yes,
feel like we
one
should
take
talk about
aesthetic.
that. Feel like we should talk about that first. There's a lot going on there. I don't think that this was the first movie to do that, but it is probably like the earliest or the most famous early example
Yeah,
of.
this is at a time where this is a ridiculous way of doing things that everyone is, what are you doing? And this is the production reality. And also because you are filming on film as well. I think
Mhm,
are not easy, but are simpler now because of the digital reality we live in, of the ability to chop and change. But if you are burning through film under
mhm,
and then the specific light conditions that come with having to manually pull focus, of like keeping this going, the sound of it, the weight of it, filming on film is intense already and adds that atmosphere, and then trying to capture one take through that, it's
yeah,
very, very difficult.
it's. Do you know how long the shooting period was for this? I was really curious about that, and I didn't come across it at
I
all.
read a little bit about it. It was the thing that it kept coming up was it took longer than they thought it would. Of that sense
Mhm.
of they were just not able to get through very much on a day. So it's an adaptation of a play,
Yeah,
and it
and
seems very, very simple. But
was that mostly rehearsals, or was that mostly like not being able to get everything that they needed in a single take? Or it's like I mean, we spoke about this a little bit before. I don't know if we were speaking about this once we started recording or if this was before, but like what it's really like these like 10-minute takes that are then like stitched together. And my understanding is like there were times where like they get through like 9.5 minutes, and then like the camera shows a boom operator in the reflection at the end, and it's like, well, we're gonna have to shoot that whole thing over again. So yeah, all of those complications
well,
like
I
obviously
did
made
read a
this like way
story that
more
maybe is
daunting.
apocryphal, that at one point while filming, like the dolly operator's toe got run over, and they had to get like just like dragged out and gagged to make sure that it wasn't just like, because it got so long getting here. It's got to be right. So who knows if that's apocryphal, but it seems very on point for what's going on here. So yeah, it's these 10-minute setups, which has got to partly be because of the physical amount of time that you can shoot,
Hmm.
and also for realistic purposes. And then there are a couple of purposeful, obvious discontinuity edits that
Hmm.
want you to see an edit. That happens a couple of times. But apart from that, it is stitched together for a 1917 would be the modern example of a film that applies the same technique of it is a whole bunch of, though they refuse to say how many, a whole bunch of
Hmm.
takes put together where they find points. I would say, far be it for me to insult another film's podcast, Rope is less ridiculous than 1917 and is less sacrificing of itself than
Hmm.
1917 is in applying. There's a bit that my wife hates in that film, which is where, you know, when they go in to look after that woman and save that kid or whatever, and they have to
Hmm.
leave the door open, which
Hmm.
that character would not do because they're going to protect somebody. They've got to leave the door open because the camera operator's got to walk through behind them. And there is
Yeah.
never anything like that in Rope. There are some points where it feels silly that it keeps going, but I feel
Hmm.
it's blocked out. I mean, because it's only in one location, really, but it's blocked out
Yeah.
very intentionally with the camera's always going to be here in mind in a way that doesn't sacrifice the reality of the drama.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, it's kind of mimicking, or not kind of mimicking, but I part of the reason why I think Hitchcock and team decided to go through this particular exercise for this particular story is because it's like based on a play that's
Yes.
set in a single location. So it is in a lot of ways like mimicking the way that it is that we interact with plays. I think I don't know who the producer was, but someone was basically thinking like we should just like film plays as they're set up in like in theaters and then screen those and watch them play out. And I think that this is one of the best, if not the best example of actually like marrying the two
Yeah, I agree.
sensibilities of both stage play and cinema, because there are a lot of times where you watch a movie that's based on a play and it feels like a play because it's just like it just
Yeah.
lacks any sort of like cinematic flair whatsoever. It's like, well, you're moving this to a different medium, so you can use the tools of that medium to like engage in the story in a different
And
way
yeah,
or present it
stage
to us in a
acting and
different
film
way.
acting are so different as well. I watched the piano lesson, the film from last year, which just felt so much like a play still, because though they were accomplished performances, you could tell they were used to the plague and they were over projecting and performing to be
Hmm.
seen from everywhere. And suddenly the camera's up in their face. They don't need to be in that way. So it's a really good translation. And yeah,
Yeah.
as I've written about, it wants to keep the energy of the actors to keep it going as if it were a play is the idea there.
Even something in this, like the set is still more cinematic than just
Mm,
a theater
I
stage
love that
set.
window, yeah.
The window is amazing, and we talked about how the use of color is just to highlight the sunset, through that window.
The
But that
slightly
backdrop is.
sped up sunset, which is really fun. There's like this point that the film is an hour 20 minutes and it
Mhm.
happens in real time, but the film actually takes place over an hour and 40 minutes. And
Yeah.
by speeding up the sunset slightly artificially is the way they achieve that illusion of you want to feel like you've spent more time with people, because an 80-minute party seems too short and a 100-minute
Mhm.
party is still quite short, but it feels a bit more. So there's a few things done quite cleverly to make it feel like you're spending more time with these characters than you are.
I thought that was super fascinating. Thinking about it after watching the movie, where you're like, okay, you're experiencing this thing in real time, but then you're thinking, okay, this is a story that starts in the afternoon, maybe even late afternoon, and then goes through an evening party, and then by the time it ends, it's fully the evening time. And that cannot take place over the amount of time that the story was presented to us, even though it's presented as this one continuous take about this like single setting,
Mm.
which I feel like is like Hitchcock was so great about making you aware that you were watching a movie without ever taking you out of
Yeah.
whatever story it is that you're watching and experiencing,
Yeah,
and
it's
like
not Brechtian,
go.
but it is the form is fronted because
Yeah.
it's so gleeful. One of my favorite lines in this film is because he's very good. and he's not writing his pictures, but has an ear for a type of comedy, and lines that describe the film but don't overly describe the film. There's a
Hmm.
really wonderful line partway through where the ostensible main character is accused of using words because he likes the way that they sound, and that's such a great astute observation of this film. Every line is just this double meaning joke about we killed somebody, and
Yeah.
it's like, yes, that is how this film was written. This film was written this way. You sort of notice this. Have a great time realizing that. It's good stuff.
With that line, there's also the idea that like a lot of the camera movements in the movie are very much so drawing the viewer's attention to the fact that there is a particular camera movement happening, which I feel like it's something that Hitchcock does a lot, where he wants to make you aware that you're watching a movie, and it's like you might just be using that zoom or that that dolly slide or that that sweep or whatever because you think that it looks good, and it doesn't always necessarily just have like a
Mm.
functional purpose within presenting the story to us,
It's
which
very theatrical in both sense of the word, isn't it? Theatrical in terms of it comes from theatre, then theatrical in sense of there's a flamboyancy to the film that's really delicious.
yeah, very very delicious.
Yeah.
um Yeah, I think ultimately, and we'll move on from the gimmick of the one take or the continuous take of the presentation of the movie. I think it ultimately does serve everything that's happening here in a way that really does enrich the viewing experience and is also just like a really, really, really interesting sort of there's your cat. A really interesting a really interesting experiment in filmmaking where it's going sort of beyond what it is that we're used to in terms of how films are constructed in order to make something that is unique and singular. And obviously, like you said, there have been a lot of movies that have tried to replicate this sort of one take gimmick. I think 1917 is like not that interesting of a movie.
No.
And I think that the gimmick really does take away. I think you were saying this, that it takes away from what it is that that movie could have been. I think I haven't seen Birdman in a while. I remember liking it, but I think that there are people who found that to be a little upsetting in terms of how this sort of like one take gimmick is deployed there. We see it a lot in like TV shows where they're
Yeah,
like, hey, let's do a single
Adolescence
episode.
this year was obviously very notable for that, which I don't know if you watched, but was a really, really good television show.
Yeah.
And each episode's in one take, and I'd say for three-quarters of them, that worked brilliantly. And then
Hmm.
for about an episode's worth of television, it was just this is a constraint you put on yourself that does not work for every scenario this TV show has to go in. And at some points, you are undoing the drama because the camera just has to sit here for a while and it's not very additive. They
Yeah.
to talk about this long take philosophy, one of my favorite filmmakers of all time is Bellatar.
Hmm.
Bellatar is known for ridiculously long takes to the extent that his wife, who's also his editor, had to become co-director of his films because she had to be involved in the direction so she could edit these together because these takes are
Hmm.
that long. And the reason why Bellatar is relevant here, one of my favorite Tar films is his adaptation of Macbeth.
Hmm.
It's a Hungarian television adaptation of Macbeth, and it's one of my favorite adaptations of that text because it is in almost entirely one shot, which you'd think, well, yeah, it's a play, but no, because a cinematic one shot is different to a staged one shot. Because actually, on a stage, you can change setups all the time, but
Hmm.
if you change setups in a film, you need to change a camera setup to go with that. So
Hmm.
it's in two shots, one very well, it's still quite long, but one short segment, then about an hour long segment. But why it's a great Macbeth is because at every point the camera stays on the character Macbeth, who is not actually
Hmm.
in every scene of the play. So a lot of the play in this Bellatar version happens off in the background, and you are
Yeah.
just stuck with having to watch the character react and wait for the play to happen around him, which does
Yeah.
of rope of the it's why it works of because you are in closest location and you have to when one takes this work it's because you have to watch the moments in between that you normally would not have to watch and in rope that
Hmm.
of the we're going to linger here for a bit too long, which is why the title becomes funny because it's like how long do they run out of rope, basically, of this camera's going to,
Yeah.
and they can't just cut and leave. The fact the camera keeps rolling is this joke of them keeping incriminating themselves if it keeps going and keeps going, and you're waiting for them to get caught up. And the continuity of the shot is so additive to that of, no, and we're
Yeah.
in our own grave here as the camera just keeps going and going and going, and we can't just bam, cut, and it'd be resolved. Because you know it won't be resolved because the syntax of the film doesn't resolve.
I love that shout about the title being sort of a joke about, you know, them being at the end of the rope, and constantly it seems like they're running out of
Great.
rope as we're going. And also, you know, obviously the whole idea of building the tension that we know what's going on. We know that there's been this murder. We know where the body is, and the tension is building as if we're, you know, pulling more and more on this piece of rope.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's working a lot of
It's so
levels.
Hitchcockian, isn't it? To just he loves this idea of here's a central prop, and you know, and it goes what we were saying about it being a film of
Mm-hmm.
you know the body's in the room this whole time, and by keeping it contained in that single location and by keeping it filmed, you can't ignore the fact it makes it so much more present, the body in this room, and it means it
Yeah,
just every time the camera pans over that chest, it's just this one reminder of that's still there, that's still
that's
there.
still
It's
yeah.
just captured
You,
wonderfully the whole way through.
I was I was checking out some reviews, and I read Roger Ebert's review, and he wasn't a fan. And one of the things that he said, he mentioned that the chest is always like kind of like there, just lurking.
Yeah, that's great.
And but for some reason, he didn't appreciate that was an element of the film. And
It's
I was like,
corny,
that's
but good
kind of,
corny. It's
yeah, it was
wonderful.
like it's kind of the whole point, is that it's always there. And like we as audience members are just like dying to know if these members of these people at the dinner party are going to realize that, you know, that body is in that chest there. And it's also kind of a funny joke as a reminder of like, you know, okay, it's been out of frame for a couple seconds or a couple minutes, and then it pops back in, and Hitchcock is like, hey, remember when there was a murder at the beginning of this story? Like, that's pretty funny, and it's still here.
Yeah.
um so one of those rare instances where it feels like Ebert maybe missed the mark. But the reasons why, that's a discussion for another day, which we've had on the show in the past. All respect to Ebert, but, you know, not always the most cinematically inclined film reviewer. So leave it at that. That brings us to the actual story that's
Yes.
going on. So we're using this one take gimmick in order to tell the story of these two guys who commit a murder and hide the body in the chest, and then host a dinner party with a bunch of people, and are kind of like toying with wanting to be found out about the murder the entire
Well,
time.
one of them is, and
Yeah,
the other one is, and
it's
this is what I do beg
the
listeners
weirdest
to,
kink.
yeah, listeners read. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself here. I don't want to be on that, but Reed takes this film from queer writers about the relationship in this film and about the sub-dom kind of vibe it has going the whole time, and how that is subtextual and metaphorical for all kinds of things. It's a really interesting portrait of a relationship, basically. And
Hmm.
forget the murder point. It's really great capturing of a dynamic where one person has the sway to the extent the other person feels they need to go along with things and is clearly discomforted by it. And it works as a good portrait of a relationship, be that a romantic or just convivial relationship, platonic,
Hmm.
whatever. That's really, really interesting. If the perfect murder thing, to put this in the Hitchcock canon, it's interesting that it's a very acclaimed film now, but I think at the time, this is more positioned as this is a dry run for Strangers on a Train, which is the more acclaimed, I'll be more accomplished, perfect murder
Hmm.
film, which again is this idea of let's do a perfect murder, and then it's all the undoing afterwards is the drama, is the way the narrative plays out, which is why it's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, well, because I'm not familiar with many other Hitchcock movies, I'm not totally aware of the perfect murder sort of outside of this movie. But yeah, sort of seeing that on the front end, and then the drama is watching the fallout from that is always a really interesting way to approach a story. And we mentioned it before, but yeah, this movie's based on a play, so it does sort of play out more. Well, it plays out a little bit like a play, but also has that cinematic flair and flourish. And I got to be totally honest. This is probably more embarrassing than my admission that I hadn't seen many Hitchcock movies, but I hadn't seen this before. So when I was first watching it, the queer undertones, I totally missed it. I
This
totally
is
missed all of
the
it.
gayest American couple in the 40s that you've ever seen in your life.
And then, and then as I was doing additional prep for the show, pretty much every review was like, yep, this movie's super queer coded. And the first time I read it, I was like,
It's just two
yeah,
confirmed bachelors just hanging out, just killing a guy.
yeah,
A
there's,
third friend who they bring
there's,
in and just throttle him.
there's never been anything more obvious in the history of filmmaking. And I totally missed it.
Well, it's because it's a great suspense film first. If you're just watching it, it is a
Mhm.
genuinely brilliant piece of thriller filmmaking. So you're caught up in the, oh my God, they're not going to get away with it because they're absolute idiots. But because it's that human compulsion of, if you've done something that's brilliant, if no one knows you've done a brilliant thing, what is it? Tree falls
Then
in the
what's,
forest. No one. So what's the point of the perfect murder if no one can ever find out about it? And
yeah,
that vanity is the core of this film, and it's so well observed. And that's why it's so remarkable. Of this person, you're right. He doesn't want to get caught, but it doesn't mean anything if no one can celebrate the achievement that he's done for the sake of an achievement.
yeah. Before we get into the vanity and everything that's happening with that aspect of the movie, is there anything else that you have in terms of the sort of like queer coded reading of this movie and the relationship between the two main characters, Brandon and what's the other gent's
Oh,
name?
God, I'm so bad at names of characters in films. The
Yeah,
only name that you'll learn from this film is David, because everyone just says David constantly. Every
yeah,
character's third word is David.
it's
Um,
Dave.
but yeah, it's the two main characters who are then added by Jimmy Stewart. This is the first
Hmm.
Jimmy Stewart Hitchcock film, and this is one of Jimmy Stewart's least favorite Hitchcock films. He sees himself as miscast in it, which
Hmm.
I think is ultimately correct because Jimmy Stewart is better at playing the more everyday disarming type, and I don't know if
Hmm.
he is well written and he's great because Jimmy Stewart's brilliant, but I don't know if you ever believe him as philosophy professor in this film.
I was totally thinking that. I was just based on previous experience with Jimmy Stewart and the kinds of characters that he plays, it felt not only against type, but sort of outside of
Not
what
successfully
it.
against type, yeah, because it's just this is a well
Yeah,
written part and you've got charm, so it works as a piece of human drama. But I don't believe that you would have this philosophical influence over these men.
no. And I was thinking about for movies like this, about people like this, how much the actor portraying those characters needs to sort of like be of that background in order to fully tap into the, I don't want to say fully sinister, because obviously like not all people from from this world are sinister, but in order to like fully tap into the like subconscious of these kinds of characters in a way that I just like don't know that Jimmy Stewart was like fully able to tap into it in like a fully believable way. But like you said, like he is always brilliant because he's Jimmy Stewart and the character is super well written. But there was a tiny missing piece of full believability that I wasn't getting from him. But sorry, keep. I was asking you about
Yeah,
any other thoughts
yeah. The
about
more wide,
the
the
queer
wider.
coding of the.
It's interesting because I think now it's more common to the reading of queer texts over time is very different over time because of the position of queerness in wider discourses. So it gets a bit complicated, and obviously how someone chooses to read this is up to them. And you can read it regressively because ultimately it's another film where the villains are queer coded and part of their villainousness is their queer
Mhm.
coding. Like these are just like mincing around defeat homosexuals that are Whit Stillman, like New York intellectuals,
Hmm.
and part of that is the grand camp of it. So you can see that as being a pejorativizing villainization of queerness, but it's also, as I said, delicious and delightful in that way. Of it's damn fun. Of
Yeah.
the gays get to be the fun characters, and everyone else is the stuffy straights. So
Hmm.
I think now it's more read in that wonderful be gay, do crime genre of look at these just wonderful, wonderful, horrible people, just totally living it up. And there is a wider reading you can get about the film that I don't know if it's overly supported by the text of
Hmm.
stigmatized communities that are ostracized to the point of that leads to circles of violence or circles of aberrant behavior, um,
Hmm.
which I don't
Yeah.
think is pulled off in characterization, but you can read some of the drama of the film as being spurred on that way. But in terms of a Hays Codeness, I think the as overt as it can be, amusing, incidental, classy depiction of this queer couple at the center of it is overall very positive and really additive to the film. It gives it a really interesting dynamic. And there's also some stuff written about the queerness of the filmmaking, which goes back to what you were saying earlier about the very apparent flamboyance, theatricality to the filmmaking. It is
Yeah.
delightful in that sense that it becomes a queer text in that way.
Yeah. I was I I love what you're saying, because I was thinking, again, as I was going through the prep and putting it together, yes, there was a lot of queer coded stuff in the relationship between the two main guys, and perhaps even the third guy who was murdered,
Mm.
and whether it was due to some sort of weird
The
love
first act
triangle
of the
thing that was
film.
going on. Yeah. uh, and then I was thinking, like, what is the point of these characters being queer? And then sort of from there thinking, well, maybe the point is just that that's who these characters are, and there's no like
Yeah.
larger thesis about queerness and homosexuality and how it's presented and performed or closeted within the world, and uh, it's it's just who these characters are, and like queer characters can also be part of a fun
It can be the
perfect
best
murder
characters in the film.
story,
Yeah, it can just
as
be just
yeah, as
brilliant
much as
characters.
any straight character is able to just be someone
Mm.
who takes part in a perfect murder kind of story. uh so I guess that's maybe why at first I wasn't, when I was watching the movie, I wasn't reading it that way, because my initial thought would be like, okay, so then what is the purpose
It's not
of
polemical,
the
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
There's
um
a quote to the extent I read from one of the people involved retrospectively that is something along the lines of there is no moment in the film that is explicitly queer, but there is
mhm,
no moment that is not implicitly queer. This kind of like joke that every single moment is both gay and not gay. There is no
yeah.
explicit gayness in the film, but every frame of this film is as gay as hell. Is basically the point they're making, which
Yeah.
is very very true and is linked to what you're saying is much more apparent in retrospect. I think if we're to read anything political into it, I think there
Mhm,
is something about repression because it is
mhm,
very invested in Freudian ideas of repression and closeted desire. So there is something in the film of if you lock down a desire to do something and if you silence push down that way, that will have negative consequences. So you could
yeah.
read that into the film of it is in praise of open queerness. I mean, it just even
Mhm,
the phatic chit chat about star signs and just what female movie stars you're enjoying at the time. It so
yeah.
captures what we now know as a milieu of of queer conversation, and
And
so therefore, yeah, it is in favor of living one's life as opposed to silencing one's life.
with that idea of silence and sort of being closed in or closeted, um, as we know is a large topic of conversation within the queer community, is also the way that this movie is made, right? So you have like the literal
Yeah,
closeted person in the trunk, the murdered body, but then also the limitation of trying to make this movie as a one take continuous shot on a single location. So, right, you don't have the full openness of being able to set up different kinds of camera shots with different lightings and different we're going to different sets and things like that. So that is another way that the actual filmmaking is also kind of reinforcing some
Yeah.
thoughts and themes that could be or that are super prevalent within the movie itself or within the story. So that whole idea that like all of this stuff is in service of each other is,
Yeah.
amazing, whether it was intentional or just a happy accident.
And I think the final arrow in the quiver is this sense of, you just know that, and this is not to paint Alfred Hitchcock as progressive, I think far from it. You just know that he gets some taboo delight out of making the gay film. Like that is a big part. It's getting one over the censors. That is
Yeah.
a big part. And though that may not come from a positive place,
Hmm.
there is I can't remember who, but there's this great line of, there's a difference between gay film and queer film. So
Hmm.
The Imitation Game is a gay film, but Daisies is a queer film, because queer films have to be rebellious and subversive. Queer cinema is
Hmm.
different to cinema that happens to be about gay people, have gay people in it. So Hitchcock may be using gayness because it's a taboo, and that may come from a negative
Hmm.
place, but there is something anarchic and subversive about reclaiming queerness as a taboo, because it being a taboo is not a negative. It being a
Hmm.
taboo is a way of reframing normality as stuffy and stupid, and therefore it's good that it's a taboo, because you don't want to be in this normality. This is the rip-roaring, fun abnormality.
And that idea goes back to what makes Hitchcock films so great, is that there was that barrier, that inherent barrier between what it was that he was able to make and what the censors would allow him to make. And if this movie were explicitly about gay people, it probably wouldn't be as enjoyable or exciting.
It would be
When
regressive as hell. It would be birdcage style discomfort of, I see what you're going for here, but this is not really working.
yeah. So it's all super 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 fascinating. The other, I think, big theme that's very interesting and fascinating within this movie that we've touched on here and there throughout the conversation is this idea of these like high-minded folks who think that they should be allowed to do the perfect murder because they feel the sense of superiority that
Yeah.
allows them
The
to
Ayn
do the perfect
Randian
murder.
Nietzschean element, and they do mention Nietzsche by name, which is
Yeah.
on the nose but necessary at this point of, just say, do you have Nietzsche then? Well, so did Hitler. There is that line. And this again, that feels a
Hmm.
bit clunky now. This is 48. This is just within the shadow of fascism being wrought, and
Hmm.
this is just post-war, so these are scary ideas, and there is that fear in the post-war community of, were we fighting against ideas or were we fighting to win something? I mean, Sam Fuller
Hmm.
is the filmmaker that I'm going to mention in every podcast ever because I love him so much, and Sam Fuller actually met Hitchcock during the war and scared Hitchcock because said he couldn't talk about secrets because Hitchcock wanted to make a movie about his secrets for D-Day and stuff, and Hitchcock
Yeah.
got very embarrassed about that. But Sam Fuller liberating a concentration camp or being involved in that at the end of that war, and only him filming that really showing actually what was going on there. There is still
Hmm.
this sense of, it's all well and good for us to look at now as, this victory over fascism, etc. But fascist thought was still on the rise and wasn't entirely pejorativized. And this film is about tackling that fascistic thought that, you're right, does take root in these intellectual circles where it seems to be nice and harmless. Because and I think we've all been in conversations where we talk theoretically about something, and
Hmm.
if someone was to take those things seriously and act on them, that would be horrendous. And I think we are
Yeah.
all very guilty of that. And that cautionary tale of this film, of the tempting world of theory where we can chat, and how places of learning can get caught up in that dangerous way of, you
Hmm.
talk about things. I mean, I have a philosophy degree, and the amount of time you speak so theoretically and divorced, and people get very frustrated about that because you do lose touch with reality. I think the other touchstone here is Plato's Republic,
Yeah.
of the idea of like the philosopher kings. This is the society that put the philosopher kings in charge. And it's like, well, of course you want that, but in reality, this is bad and it leads to this, and this just puts theory into praxis and shows it as. And the last act of this film is quite upsetting and takes a sober
Mhm.
turn, and I think pulls it off very well.
The idea that these theoretical conversations are so removed from reality, but then also when we're thinking about who these characters are in terms of like where it is within society that they exist, right? They are going to these elite institutions of higher learning. They talk a lot about how they all went to prep school together, and it just like reinforces how divorced some of the folks who are in the highest crust of society can be from the real world. And even when they are with their own bare hands, okay, I guess they're wearing gloves, so that wouldn't technically be their bare hands, but with their own hands they are committing murder, and still feel so removed from the reality of that because they are just so married to understanding everything in like an academic theoretical kind of sense, is like very, very, very terrifying. And
Yeah,
I don't think this movie ever like um it never like moves in a terrifying way, but everything that is happening and that they're talking about and the action that opens the movie is all extremely terrifying stuff. And I think like, yeah, the fact that these guys are so, our two main characters are so removed from, well, at least one of them is so removed from how terrifying his actions actually are, is even more terrifying than the act itself.
yeah, and he does spend the whole film thinking that his mentor does want this and actually thinks this, and that
Hmm.
realization of no, of this was always only just talk, and it's tempting to read the film as toothless because it is
Hmm.
about in community violence, whereas most of the violence done by this community would be onto the subordinated individuals. But I think
Hmm.
there's something more perceptive to it, that the only reason they care and the only reason they are appalled is because they hurt one of their own. Um, and I think that's why Jimmy Stewart's character is so appalled. It's like, yeah, how dare you do that to him? Of that sense of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it's this community has turned that it says like, no, we weren't supposed to turn on each other. How dare you?
Yeah.
We are the superior. They've shown themselves as inferiors because they've turned another superior. Of there is a different
Yeah.
version of this film where someone from a forced underclass is killed, and it becomes a complicit cover-up film as opposed to a gleeful
Yeah.
perfect murder film.
That's so interesting. The fact that the outrage is that it's someone else from the same
David, poor
the same
David.
world. Yeah. Not David. Why couldn't you do this to?
Why not the maid? You know, the maid they're making jokes about for the whole movie.
Yeah. It's 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 like it makes it all the more insidious, like what it is that's going on. But I found it to be super fascinating. What do you think that Hitchcock's like actual thought is about the kinds of people that he is presenting, and maybe some of the things that have like played out maybe in the real world that sort of mirror the kind of stuff that we're seeing the two main characters in this movie do?
I think it's because the play is inspired by a real the murder of a 14-year-old.
Hmm.
So it is rooted in a reality, and I think that's why it has that pivot in sincerity that it pulls off very well. Of it suddenly being very real and very alarming and not really funny anymore, and that works well. Um, I think to become parody of myself and to keep citing other films. Have you seen the Argento film Tenebrae?
I have not.
Oh, Tenebrae is such a brilliant movie, and Argento again is the in quotes Italian Hitchcock, and I think Tenebrae is probably his best film. And the plot of Tenebrae is, for me to half remember it, I've seen it for a while. So there is a horror fiction writer who goes out to Italy, and then people in Italy are being killed in ways that seem to link to his books. So the theme is basically, are if you are a creator of violent art, are you responsible for the violence your art creates, or what does it mean to put violent art to the world? Which Argento
Hmm.
makes because he is a purveyor of violent art, and that does link to Hitchcock because Hitchcock makes theoretical movies about horrible people.
Yeah.
And this film is is a slight meditation on that. Of if you take these parlor games seriously, that's really bad, and there must be this understanding that words have consequences, but also these are just words. And I think it straddles that very nicely. This is not saying, we need to be just so cut and dry all the time. It's you can still have fun with flights of fancy, but there needs to be a clear divide between the theoretical and the active. So Hitchcock, as someone that makes films about crime, this seems to be a reflection on the impact of the crime movie and the prevalence of crime. This why this one feels so prescient now is because a modern version of this would be, oh God, I watched the new I Know What You Did Last Summer film with my wife the other day, and it's now become a joke that every slasher is about true crime podcasters. It's hard to not watch a slasher that's not about true crime
Yeah.
podcasts anymore. You make
Yeah.
Rope now, it will be that premise of true crime podcasts have lent to this. So it is still that idea of our obsession with the macabre, our obsession with violence and vice. And you will always therefore have films and art by artists who deal with vice and violence, who do their reckoning work of what does it mean to make stuff about vice and violence? Let's
Yeah.
soberly put that into the real world.
Yeah. That is interesting that this is a meditation on that, because it doesn't feel as blatant as something like Killers of the Flower Moon,
No, it doesn't. It does have the director in it, because every Hitchcock film has his cameo at some point, but not as blatant as this is the epilogue to my film.
Yeah. But it is interesting that this is, in a way, a meditation on what it is that he's contributing to maybe people then carrying out acts. And it's interesting, we think of that as like a very modern sort of problem or issue or conversation. And it's interesting to think, oh, this is happening in a film in 1948 and was probably happening with like philosophers for, hundreds of years prior. And how it is that their words and their work and their art was then sort of like carried out in ways that maybe wasn't the intention or goes
Or
sort of
what's the intention? And
beyond.
that's kind of the problem of if you actually carry through the actual intention of people's words, you take them to places they didn't think that it would go to, because we are not intentioned in our actions.
Yeah. Which is also something that we see today.
Yeah, it's there are many. It's because it's a well orchestrated film. There are many parallels at the moment, which we will not dwell on too much, about people that talk about certain things and court audiences about certain things and talk academically about certain things and want to debate about certain things, and then that rhetoric can be realized, and the consequences of that can be greatly tragic in a whole variety of ways. So this is a really good film about the actual weight of words, of what you say and what you teach people is actually really important, because people, even that seem to be intelligent and rational and thinking, this main character so prides himself on being thoughtful and rational, but he's completely indoctrinated by a really
Yeah.
pernicious ideology that he doesn't realize, or does realize how it is, but no one else realizes the reality of it.
Yeah, and I think, the interesting thing is that obviously this is like a very specific story about very specific characters. And we're, talking about them being of a very specific, place and time, but it is so universal, right? Like this isn't just an American issue. This is an issue that is very global in a lot of ways. So yeah, it does feel like a very American Hitchcock movie. I know that you said that it has a lot of like British sensibilities as
Yeah.
well, and English
But I think
sensibilities,
that's
but it
because
is also
shared cultures of colonialism, basically. I think
yeah,
it is American in the same ways that it is British. So I think that's just both
yeah,
of us reading the worst parts of our country onto something, because it is exposing the worst parts of the country.
yeah, 100%. But doing it in a way that is extremely entertaining, cinematically. I love that you use the word flamboyant to
It
describe the
is.
cinematic flourish
He's
of
having
this
fun.
movie, because it's it is delicious in the way that it's presented and everything that's going on. Jimmy Stewart is Jimmy Stewart. It's like, that's cool. I don't, Steven, do you have anything else about Rope that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I want to segue into, if you like this idea of the class politics of Rope and you want to see a more sober successor to it, I think that Michael Haneke is the filmmaker to watch, who is a real favourite of mine. Michael Haneke has a few films. One of his central directorial themes is moral glaciation, which this film is on the cusp of. but this film is not bitingly into that. These characters aren't glaciated. These characters are inebriated and loving it. But there's Benny's Video is an underseen Haneke film about this entitled white kid that just kills someone because they can.
Hmm.
And then that film is then basically the covering up of that, because it is so aware there is a type of person that will just do violence because they can just do violence and they'll get away with it. And the two more notable films that take that up are Cachet and Funny Games. I'm surprised you haven't seen Funny Games.
Yeah, I think it's been on the watch list for forever.
Funny Games is memed to death, but it is actually an absolutely brilliant film. And it is so abrasively about there is a class of privileged people who can do whatever they want and they are
Hmm.
going to get away with it. And we have helped them and supported that. And Cachet, which is one of my absolute top 10 favorite films of all time, even has
Hmm.
chicken murder in it that seems to be a link to Rope as well, but is very
Ah,
much about colonial histories intersecting to privileged people and the violence done in the past and a reckoning of that. Oh, you would love Cachet is such a brilliant film, and you
yeah,
need to watch it.
that's been on the watch list for forever.
If you've
So
seen Lost Highway, they share a similar conceit, strangely as well.
okay, okay, yeah, I can get down with that for sure. This might be an interesting or an easy way to lead us into recommendations, since you are already recommending some other
Yeah,
films that are sort of continuing the thematic questions of Rope. So if you're ready, I feel like we can jump in. There are probably a ton of other things that we can talk about in regards to Rope, but I think that we've covered a lot of the main bases,
yeah,
the things that need to be talked
great
about.
movie.
Great movie. Totally understand why it's essential. Hitchcock, you did it again. That this guy, he might know a thing or two about
Mm.
filmmaking.
As I think Pitbull once said, watch you make a movie like Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to watch you do
Hot,
that.
hot take. I would love to see Pitbull attempt to remake Rope. That
Yeah,
is,
Pitbull, I will watch you. I'll take you at your word there. I'm watching. Go.
yeah. Let's. I would love that evolution of
And another
Pitbull's
one.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, sweet. Let's do some recommendations for other things to check out. You know the rules, listeners. You guys know the rules.
Mm.
Recommending 3 things
We know the rules, and so do I.
related to Rope. First rule is don't talk about recommendations or something like that. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been a film bro, so I haven't seen Fight Club in years.
I'm
Uh,
not recommending Fight Club.
only recommending Fight Club. No, we're recommending 3 things. At least one has to be a movie. Other 2 can be any and everything else. Connections to Rope as loose or as obvious as we like. It could just be a piece of rope. So,
Mm.
Stephen, whenever you're ready, what is your first reco?
I'm going to throw out an underseen and therefore underappreciated Hitchcock movie, which is
Mhm.
a little bit late period. Some people don't like it too much. I think it's great. It is one of his Wrong Man films. It is a film called The Wrong Man, 1956. Henry Fonda starring. Henry Fonda maybe is not. Some don't think Henry Fonda is well cast in this film. I think his casting really brings it something because
Mhm.
of what you expect from that character. But yeah, this is a more straight up drama about innocent man arrested for a crime, and it kind of becomes this legal proceeding that follows him through. And I think it's just a really effective, underseen, and really, really, really good Hitchcock movie. And everyone knows his masterpieces and great films, so it's always good to shout out. But it's
Yeah.
also this film that's great. So The Wrong Man is a really good Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Amazing. I love it. Um, I am going to recommend uh, another movie that kind of relies on a particular kind of gimmick to present its story. Um, I always, or not always, but there was a period of time where I linked this movie with 1917 because they felt like they were doing kind of similar things in terms of the gimmick, and I thought that the gimmick kind of took away from what it was that the movies actually could have been. This is maybe a movie that I should revisit because I don't know if that's a fair assessment or if it actually is something that's cool and interesting. But my first recommendation is going to be Boyhood.
Hey, I love Boyhood.
A different kind of gimmick, but a gimmick nonetheless. And at times it feels like we could be doing something outside of this to just tell whatever story it is that you want to tell.
I'm going to recommend a movie that I don't particularly like very much. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's great. But it's such an oddity, and I think people should watch it. Have you seen? This is not the movie I'm recommending. Have you seen
Mhm.
Strangers on a Train?
No, I have.
Okay,
I have
watch Strangers
not.
on a Train because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then you should watch the Danny DeVito directed Throw Mama from the Train, which is somewhat of a parody of Strangers on a Train, but also a
Okay.
readaptation of the same book. It's crude and doesn't always work, but it's a
Yeah.
manic DeVito remaking of Hitchcock, self-aware. He shouts crisscross a lot. That's quite funny. So yeah,
Yeah.
the much maligned for some good reason, but slightly endearing Danny DeVito starring vehicle and directorial effort. Throw Mama from the Train.
So we've got Danny DeVito doing Strangers on a Train, and now we're gonna get Pitbull doing Rope.
Yeah,
Is there?
yeah.
I don't know if there's any
It makes
other
sense.
random modern day public figures or celebrities that we also want to remake certain Hitchcock movies.
I think everyone should have a
Cool.
go. I think in there was. Are you familiar with the Monster Raving Loony Party?
No.
So the Monster Raving Loony Party are a joke political party in the UK who run at
Hmm.
every election and just have a joke manifesto of just funny
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
And there's also actually this one might have been Count Binface actually, who's not Monster Raving Loony Party, but he's very much a successor too. So Count Binface is another leading UK electoral candidate. What Count Binface? He wears a bin in his head, and he runs against whoever is the leading. So he ran against David Cameron or whatever. That was quite funny.
Yeah.
But one of his policy points was we should nationalize Adele. So I feel in that similar way that we should nationalize Alfred Hitchcock films. So
Yeah.
it's rather than bringing in national service, we should have a new
Hmm.
national service in the UK, which is that anyone that reaches national treasure stage. So even though they may not be great people, your Stephen Fry's and your Kenneth Branaghs should have to make a Hitchcock film.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I want to see Kenneth Branagh do one
Oh,
though.
I don't. It would be bad. I don't want to see him make any film.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm thinking like I want to see like an American football coach. I want to see like Bill Belichick do Vertigo.
I don't know who that. I mean, I know I've heard the name.
You've heard the name. Just know that he is someone who wouldn't even know how to turn on a camera if he were presented with one. So the idea of him he's more random than Pitbull
Okay. What
making
about
rope.
Kurt Schilling's The Man Who Knew Too Much?
For some reason, I don't think that would work
Really? Is it because he knows too much?
because he thinks that he does know too much. So,
Is he the
so that
bloody
would be
sock guy?
it would be a weird interpretation of that. All right, we'll keep brainstorming. It's a
Yeah.
work in progress.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm going to give my second recommendation, which is another movie about folks from elite Ivy institutions and all that who are so up their own asses in terms of their high-minded ideas and not realizing that when they put those things into reality, the real world effects that it has on other people, and not realizing that like they are being terrible, despicable people, but think because they are superior or they feel that they're superior to others that they can sort of do whatever it is that they please. I'm recommending The Social Network.
I knew you were going to do that. Yeah. No, good call.
Yeah.
Good call.
Just a bunch of douchebags from Harvard.
Yeah.
That's that's it. That's the
No,
that's the
good.
whole
No,
that's the
that's
whole
right.
connection. Yeah.
I've mentioned a whole bunch of films that would have been recommendations as well. So I'm gonna. So obviously your Cachets and your Tenebrae do go to, but I mentioned the film Daisies.
Mhm.
So I'll go for that. So that's a anarchic queer film of just two women just uproariously just ruining the lives of people around them. So you want
Hell
to
yeah.
see just riotous fun at the expense of others, and
Yeah.
Daisies is it's Czech New Wave film Vera Titlova, which I probably mispronounced, and I apologize. But yeah, there's these two women who men are trying to constantly woo and whatever, and they, through the language of film, just overindulge, completely force that out, take scissors to the film itself, and just wonderful subversive brilliance. So if you want to get into the queer film canon, Daisies is a great place to start and has a more openly subversive tone.
Amazing. I love that recommendation.
That's
I am going to add Daisies to my watch list.
It's so fun.
I'm going to stay on the be gay, do crime train, but maybe go with something a bit more conventional that came out within the last 2 years. But I think a lot of people did love it, but it might have just been big in like the letterbox crowd and not necessarily with like the general public. But I feel like everyone who I know who did watch it was a big fan. It's very enjoyable, as most be gay, do crime movies are. I'm going to recommend Love Lies Bleeding. Very fun.
I loved that movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Also,
loved that movie.
Amazing wigs in that movie. That might have been the best wig movie of whatever year it came out. Right? You've got Dave Franco in a wig and a mullet wig and a mustache.
Good bug sounds.
You've got you've got not Ed Helms. Oh my God, why am I not Ed Harris? You've got Ed Harris in a great wig.
Yeah, bug.
Yeah, great wig.
Great
Kind of
wig movie at the end. You wouldn't expect that, but it kind of is.
Yeah, very fun.
Do
very
not
fun
go
stuff.
in expecting to hear the song "Love Lies Bleeding" by Elton John. You'll be disappointed, as I was.
That's a very fair warning.
Yeah,
or you could do what I did and not be familiar with Elton John enough to know that song or be expecting it and not be disappointed.
It's only just the half of the first track off his most famous album, but that's fine. It's because the track is "Funeral for a Friend" / "Love Lies Bleeding" because it's two songs in one. "Love Lies Bleeding" is the second half of that track. It's his best song.
I was never been an Elton John guy.
Well, it's because you haven't heard that song. It's his best song. Listen to it. Hit up Spotify or Tidal if you're a Jay-Z fan or whatever.
Yeah.
And listen to "Funeral for a Friend" / "Love Lies Bleeding." And you go, "This Elton John guy."
Okay.
He's got
I'll check it out. I don't think that I wouldn't be an Elton John guy. I just never really got into him.
Yeah, but now you're going to. You can listen to this one song and you go, wow. This
one
song is two songs, so that's a...
Throw on Daisies, throw on the song.
Yeah.
And
I recommend half of an Elton John song.
Yeah, I'm to have a grand old time. Stephen, thank you again so much for joining. I feel like I always have a blast whenever you come on.
I have a blast too. It's always a delight to be invited.
Always so much fun. Where can people find you these days? I feel like you're doing a lot of writing, and want to point folks in the direction of that writing so they can read all of your lovely thoughts about cinema and all the rest.
Always writing a decent amount on letterboxd.com. I'm not doing as much as I have been doing recently, mostly because I'm just parenting and working is just takes up a lot of your time.
Yeah, it's weird how that happens.
And as a weird thing that I've noticed it's just listener, feel free to stop listening now because I'm just going to talk about my life for a bit. You can stop listening, just keep on this podcast. It's great, etc., etc. But I found it harder to keep up watching films because films require attention, and I've weirdly found it easier to play more video games and stuff because they're so drop in and drop out. So I've just been experiencing different culture because more hobbies and things that I can do for a bit and feel satisfied, apart from feeling bad that it took me a whole day to watch a 90-minute film that I watched in 20-minute spurts on my iPhone at times. So I've been writing a lot about video games and video game podcasts that you can find called Quick Save. Also writing some game reviews on stepprinter.com, but also some film reviews on stepprinter.com. And you can also read my film words on Letterboxd when I watch films, which I still do. I still do write about them, but not as prevalently as one did.
That's funny because I feel like you still watch more movies than me.
That's probably true. It's still not a good amount.
You're still watching a lot of movies.
I'm not matching it with the level of writing about that. I feel that's the difference. If I'm managing to watch stuff, but I'm not writing obnoxiously long things. I'm writing, there you go. There's 3 paragraphs for this thing as opposed to 3,000 words about some random movie. So at
least you're not dropping in once a week, dropping one-liners like your boy.
True.
Yeah.
I aspire to that.
Save that for me. But everyone should check out your writing. I'm going to check out some of the video game stuff, even though I'm not a big video game guy.
You're not going to join the Silk Long conversation? We're not going to have just like an hour-long Hollow Knight Silk Long conversation? No? Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Not with me, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I
But
guess not.
everyone should follow on Letterboxd. A great follow. I hope to have you back on sometime soon, either
Yes,
later
please.
this season or next season. But we do hope to have you on soon. Screenagers, I know we've been away for a while, which I didn't even acknowledge on the front end, but
Mhm.
we took a break for a couple weeks. I was also a little busy, not with a kid, but with other stuff.
Good
So
stuff, man.
we're back. We'll be back in a couple days. You don't have to wait a full week for the next episode. We'll be back later this week talking Moon. Very
I
excited for
love
that.
Moon. I
I have not seen
Moon
Moon, but people
was.
love Moon.
I don't know if it will hold up for you. Moon is maybe the most formative film of my film watching. It was because I just, and not because it's particularly great, but I
Hmm.
went to see it at the cinema in 2010. So I was born in 1992, so work out that for yourself. And it
Yeah,
was one of
same.
the first films that I saw that made me realize that I like different films to most other people, which sounds really
Hmm.
weird, but it was like most people I know would not want to watch this. And I
Hmm.
watched this because someone said it was pretty good, and it was such a formative film for me in a, oh, I like films. I don't just like watching films. I like this medium and I'm invested in it. So I will always love
Yeah,
Moon so much for it being a independent kind of interesting release that was a bit off the beaten track. That I went, oh, there is so much cool stuff out there playing in
yeah,
cinemas, and film is so vast and wide. It's a really good movie. But yeah, really special to
awesome.
me.
I love that. I love that little tidbit to lead us into Moon. I'm very excited to watch
David
and talk
Bowie's
about it
son, so
with.
you know.
Sorry.
The director is David Bowie's son, so you know, that's got that going
Oh,
for it.
I did not know that.
Okay.
Guess
Nepo
what?
baby.
Surprise, surprise. I was never a big David Bowie guy either.
Gosh.
Really, I'm just disappointing left and right
Yeah.
this entire episode. So we should end it before I disappoint
This
a
one
little
was
bit
left.
more. Steven, thank you again for joining Screenagers. Thank you as always for listening. We'll see you in a couple days for Moon. And as always, in the meantime, we will see you folks in the wasteland.